Best ever listeners, how you doing? Welcome to the best real estate investing advice ever show. I'm Joe Fairless. This is the world's longest running daily real estate investing podcast where we only talk about the best advice ever. We don't get into any of that fluffy stuff. We don't like that fluffy stuff. Only the real hard-hitting stuff. With us today to talk about that is Whitney Sewell. How you doing, Whitney?
I am very blessed, Joe. Grateful to be here.
Well, I am glad that you're here. And Whitney, this is Whitney's first time on the show, and I'd venture to say that it's also a record for the show that he has hosted this show one time at least. Was it just one time, Whitney?
It was.
Just one time. He hosted the show one time, episode 1690. The show title is "What Are the Challenges You Faced Starting Your Syndication Journey?" So he has been a host of this show, but yet he has never been interviewed to be a guest on the show. So today we're turning the table and Whitney will be an interview guest. We had a guest host back then. And so now approximately 1,000 days later, you will be a guest, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. I've known Whitney for many years. I don't know, Whitney, do you know how many, like 7, 6, 7, something like that, 5?
Yeah, at least 5 or 6 years.
5 or 6 years, and he's a great person. And let me tell you a little bit more about him. CEO and founder of LifeBridge Capital. They've got $345 million worth of apartment communities that they syndicate. They just closed their first fund. He's also got a daily podcast, his own podcast, the Real Estate Syndication Show, based in Roanoke, Virginia. With that being said, you want to give the best ever listeners a little bit more about your background and your current focus?
Of course, Joe. Background, I March 2001 joined the military. Had no idea shortly after I would be going to Iraq and spending a year in combat. Unfortunately, not everyone in my squad made it home. So obviously just lots of lessons there learned. One thing the military, I think, taught me was to have a never give up mentality. It's just not an option to give up when you're in combat, right? Other people are depending on you. And but I came home, thank the Lord, and tried to figure out what I was going to do for a career. Policing seemed like a great transition for me. And I was hired by Kentucky State Police, 1,200 applicants, 5 positions. I loved working the road as a police officer, loved the service, the discipline, the uniform, all those things. However, got married, and then my wife and I just passed each other in the hallway the first whole year of marriage, and quickly discovered, hey, it's going to be hard to support a family on, $28,000 roughly a year. And plus just working all the overtime I possibly could to get over to, 33, 34,000. And so, I thought there has to be something different that we can do and to supplement our income. I wasn't exposed to real estate at this time or before this, but I read that purple book amongst many others that exposed my thinking, right, to what's possible. And really that so many people have built wealth in real estate. And I thought, okay, if all of these people can do it, I can do something. And so right away, Chelsea and I, we jumped in and started trying to learn about real estate. This was like 2008-ish, 2009 now, and bought 2 triplexes, made a ton of mistakes, self-managing, and learned a lot the hard way. Newly married, we like to just make things as crazy as possible.
Yeah.
We also bought our first house, remodeling it while living in it. Still working the crazy schedule. It was quite stressful on a new marriage. Thank the Lord we're still married today, but it was a lot of stress. And so I kept seeking, though, a way to increase my income, became a federal agent, moved to Virginia, where we live now. That was a real blessing for us. I got, better hours, better income, all those things, but still pursuing real estate. Bought a 15-unit complex with a partner at this time. Still learned a lot the hard way, and I really thought that, it was so much bigger than I ever imagined, Joe, even at 15 units, right? But I also took the next step most people take, I think. I'm not sure if you took this, Joe, becoming successful in real estate. I became a professional horse trainer. And so that was something, it was just a passion of mine I had since I was a little boy. But it became a second full-time job and then some. And so grew in that and started making good money doing that. But there was a major turning point a few years into that where my wife and I were walking on the beach, and we just ask ourselves an important question, Joe. We said, is what we're doing right now going to get us where we want to go 5 years from now, or even 10 years from now? And the obvious answer at that time was absolutely not. And so this was like September timeframe. And then we came home and sold our farm. We decided, hey, if we're ever going to do this, now's the time. We put the farm on the market and we're moving out right after Christmas. And that's actually the same time you and I met as well. And I'd learned about syndication. I'd started to learn about, hey, this thing, commercial real estate, and that it wasn't just for those that had been in the business 20, 30 years, like I thought, right? I never imagined being able to buy a 100-unit complex or $10 million building. That just did not seem possible for me. But once again, started going to conferences, started meeting people who were doing it, and my eyes were exposed again to, hey, wait a minute, if all of these people can do this, I can do that too. I can figure this out, and really just a scalable business model that seemed doable, right? It seemed possible for me then. But selling the farm was a massive commitment for us as well. I think that was crucial, just to be all in, as well. Another thing, is I know you know, Joe, but is our big mission, our big why at this time. We were pursuing our third adoption process, and when we learned about adoption many years ago, we learned just about the need and the cost and all those things that hinder so many families. And it pushed us to start a foundation that helps families adopt children. And so that was a big mission behind LifeBridge Capital. But I would say too, that during those times when it was really difficult getting the business started, that was a mission for my wife as well, right? She couldn't care less about real estate, but she was 110% into that, or into our supporting our mission. Shortly after, the podcast came along, and daily show, which you mentioned, 1,400 roughly shows now. Met my business partner Sam Rust, and he had more deal flow, I had more capital, and we really took off once we were able to meet. And now it's multifamily, all value add, typically type projects in Colorado and Idaho, and about 350 million in assets.
When people hear 1,400 episodes, that's probably impressive, but I want to be clear about 1,400 episodes, divide that by 365. That's 3.8 years, almost 4 years that you've been doing a daily show. And is that 5 days a week or 7? 7. So yes, I did the math right. So it's almost 4 years that you've been doing a daily show. So every single day for almost the last 4 years, there has been an episode published. What has been the main benefit of doing that? And then what's been a downside of doing that?
One of the main benefits, there's so many that have come from the daily podcast, and I glossed over that a little bit a minute ago, but if I had to pick one, I would say personal development, because that's, it's almost infinite returns, right? Just the personal development, how that changes so many things. But man, speaking, I never imagined ever speaking or hardly ever into a microphone, started a podcast, and then, speaking on stages that I just never imagined being on, right? In front of so many people, and the learning, the building the teams and hiring people that it pushed me to do. There's so many things, but that's one of the main benefits. But then I would say the next bigger benefit too would be the network, right? Growing the network, meeting so many great people in our industry and learning from them at the same time, being able to ask all those questions that we have. One of the biggest downsides of doing a daily podcast, which you know so well, is the time commitment, right? I was still working full time, believe it or not. I was off work from my federal position every other Monday. And our team knew, hey, you better have 12 to 15 interviews scheduled that day, 2 days a month. I mean, so my wife would call it my marathon day. It was as hard as I could go, nonstop. I mean, literally, she would pack my lunch to go to the basement. I mean, it's just madness, right? But that level of time commitment, I think I did not. I underestimated even the commitment it took for my family to pull that off. Also, for my wife and kids being gone that much.
Mm-hmm. And I'm nodding my head because I know, I know your feeling, and I know what you mean from all those fronts. I want to go back to the question that you and your wife asked when you were walking on the beach that changed the direction and the trajectory of your career. You asked, you two asked, will what we're doing now get us where we want to go? And you said, I think you said absolutely not, or I think I remember you saying something that's definitively no. And that piques my interest because I heard what your background is, and you had bought 2 triplexes, and you also had just closed on a 15 unit with a partner. So why wouldn't that momentum, if you go from 2 triplexes to a 15 unit, and then you do well on the 15 unit, you 1031 that into a 30 unit or a 45 unit or 60 unit and just keep going, why wouldn't that get you where you want to go?
Good question. It does get some people maybe where they want to go. It was not going to scale fast enough for us. But another part of that, though, was, it was the horse training business was never going to create the wealth that we had wanted, or for our children, or to be able to help enough people as well. And so while that was going pretty well, I had to cut that off completely, right? I knew that was not going to, it was never going to be passive. Those people wanted me to be the one to train their horses, or me to be the one to hold the clinic, or whatever that may be. I knew that maybe it doesn't mean I can't ever ride horses again, but at least for a period of time, I've got to cut that off, right? So I still do the federal agent position and still support the family, right? The kids still have to eat, but still have the time to push into syndication. But when I started learning about syndication, Joe, it was like, okay, I mean, when I can buy a $30 million project, I can help, obviously, lots of investors. I can help that many more families through the foundation because it's such a bigger deal. There's so much more income. There's so much more capital. Obviously, it's a lot more work, I would say, as well. But we can move so much faster and help so many more people. And I think almost the same amount of time as it would take to buy another 15 unit, or even to buy the next 30 unit, we could have bought a 100 unit or 150 unit.
So having that greater purpose, that's
right.
The key. Because it's about helping the one quote, help enough people get everything they want, and you'll get everything you want. Perhaps it's that might be too capitalistic for your example, but it's a close cousin to the concept that you're talking about.
For sure.
So let's talk about your business. We heard a 15 unit and 2 triplexes, but yet I introduced you having 345 million assets under management. What was the tipping point for that?
Tipping point was definitely meeting my business partner, Sam Rust.
Why?
Complementary skill sets. Ultimately, he had deal flow. I'd been working, networking and meeting investors as hard as I could go for a good while at that point. I mean, it allowed our first deal to be $20 million together.
What was where did you meet him, and what was your previous deal before that $20 million deal?
Yeah, so the previous deal before that would have been the 15 unit, and then I partnered with you on a couple of projects as well, and which was crucial in just launching and getting started, no doubt about it. And then shortly after that, Sam and I met actually at the Best Ever conference. So at your conference, we met, and we were just at dinner one night, heard him share about his family, his faith, what he had done in business, even a smaller deal that he had already syndicated. I could tell he was very gung-ho, and was somebody that I could connect with. And we actually talked a few times, but then the last night of the conference, I just pulled him aside and said, "Hey, Sam, my wife and I have been praying for a business partner for a long time. You seem to fit the bill. I'd love to get to know you better, ultimately," right? I make it very clear. It doesn't mean we're going to partner, but I want to get to know you, right? And he was excited. This is like 10:30 at night now, the last night. He took me to the airport and took me by his house as well. So I met his wife that night at like 11 or 12 o'clock. And actually, she had homemade bread and coffee there when I got there. And so I knew.
Oh, my. That's amazing. What did you put on the line for that $20 million deal? Like, what were you risking?
It's a good question. For that $20 million project for us, the risk was almost all the work we had put in up to that point, right? I mean, the network that we had created, all the just the time spent, the podcast, all this stuff that we had been working so hard on. Man, now it's our time to see what we can do, right? Can we actually do it? And so obviously Sam and I both had earnest money in and those things, but
How much? Do you remember?
I don't remember exactly. I don't know if
About a couple 100,000.
probably at least 100 to 200,000, I would
Okay.
imagine.
And I imagine it was non-refundable.
Right.
So you had 100 to 200,000 approximately non-refundable. And were you in a position to lose that should the deal not happen?
No way. There is no way. There were months, Joe, that I didn't even know if we were going to have the capital to keep producing the podcast. And so much less lose that kind of capital, on that first deal.
So what gave you the faith to put that non-refundable money down and to buy a project, a $20 million project, when you hadn't done that before to that level?
One, I think education, mentorships, obviously with you as well, Joe, during that time and now, but it was just people that surrounded us, Sam's ability to underwrite deals, and both of us coming together with our skill sets to look at this deal and ensure that, hey, this is a good deal in this market. We love the market. We love just the dynamics of this deal. We knew that there was tons of room for growth there. I mean, there were numerous things around that value add plan, of course, but that was it.
What hasn't gone right in your journey? Since you started, since that first $20 million deal to today, what has not gone right?
I would say the time commitment for one was as far as just the time away from family and children for like 2.5 years or so. I was more than I expected potentially, but was willing to keep pushing through to do that. Deal wise, I would say probably that project we should have raised more money for CapEx. Would be a learning curve there. The deal still actually, believe it or not, the deal just went under contract to sell. And so that project just went under contract. So today or yesterday or today. So it's gone really well. The Lord's been really kind. However, we did learn a lot through that project, and that's probably one of the bigger things that didn't go well. We should have raised more money. It's just meant later in that business plan, Sam and I both have put money into that deal to finish some CapEx or something like that.
Mm-hmm. As far as the time away from family and children, it's a trade-off. I imagine you think of it similarly, where, hey, put in a lot of time now for even more time with family later, because I'm building something that is scalable and I can eventually step back from at least a little bit from relative to where I'm at now. But knowing what you know now, with the time commitment involved, would you do it again?
I would do it again in a heartbeat if I knew then. I mean, what I know now, yes, by far, I have more freedom now than I've ever had in my life. As much as I want to build into my own schedule, right? And so it's just been a major life change because of the commitment.
And so I think that's a part where a lot of real estate entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs in general can get tripped up. And that is the consistent commitment daily over an extended period of time. We just talked about your daily podcast is approaching 4 years now, and you were going into the basement with a sack lunch to do 12 to 15 interviews on your day off from your full-time job. And that's quite a commitment. At what point, if any, did you think, let's just rein this, let's just scale this back a little bit and let's pump the brakes some and let's get some sanity here?
I don't think I could allow myself to think that way and keep going.
Why?
It just, it would have been too easy to quit, I think, if I had been thinking that way. Right. I mean, I had a team behind me, I had family behind me. We had a mission that was bigger than us. Right. Like there's so many things that I look back and I think some of that was purposeful. Some of it was not, but I was thankful that there was all of that driving us. right? And so built a system as well, right? I knew if I produced a weekly show, Joe, I would have said, you know what, I can save the money. I can learn how to edit the audio and video and all these things. I'll find the guests and I'll write the intros. I can figure it out. I'll do it. But I know that I would have gotten behind. I would have probably quit then because I could not have kept up. But because I call it like overcommitting, right? Because I overcommitted in a big way, I had to figure out a new way to operate. And I had to figure out a new way, which was hiring people and creating systems that I had never done before. And so I think a lot of that even pushed me to keep going. Like they had people lined up, right? I had to keep going. These people are depending on me to be there. But not only that, my family could depend on me to keep going, right? These people that we're helping now through the foundation, and they didn't know it yet, but they were depending on us as well. And so that's a lot of what kept us going.
What's the challenge for you right now in your business?
Learning to manage quick growth, fast growth, and team growth. So we're hiring great people, but I think one challenge right now is the culture and the ensuring we're creating great culture and communication and things like that amongst a fast growing team.
And what have you been doing to remedy that?
One thing is learning more about the EOS system or traction entrepreneur system. I'm sure many have heard of, but for us, it's been implementing specific types of meetings. And so we do a thing called a daily huddle. It's called a daily huddle, but we do it 3 days a week. And it's really quick. Every team member's on there. We all say a success. We all say something we're focused on that day. And we say if there's anywhere that we're stuck. And so that helps me as like a leader to see, okay, what's everybody's focus? What is anyone stuck on? Right. And then immediately too, I can say, okay, this team member, that team member, hang on here for, just a minute after the meeting and let's discuss that thing. Or I know this thing's coming up that we need to discuss, or maybe they're focused on something that I didn't know they were focused on and I need to help redirect their focus. Right. So that's been very helpful. We've also started L10s recently, or level 10 meetings, right? It's in an effort to help everyone operate at a level 10, right? And that's a learning process in itself. But those two things have helped us to at least, we're all virtual, right? But it's helped us to see each other more, helped us to know more about what everyone does, what everyone's working on. So it's just encouraged a lot of communication. However, they're very structured. There is an agenda. And, the meeting schedule for an L10 may be an hour and a half, but if we're done in 30 minutes, we're done. We're moving on to something else, right? So it's, we're in, we're out, but it does provide a great way for us to communicate.
High level, how do you structure an L10 meeting?
Yeah, so we'll start off with like 5 minutes of successes. What are successes anyone's experienced, over the last 7 days, and that could be personally or professionally. We'll talk about some numbers that we're tracking or where different people are at, and really more organizational level, maybe investor relations, or maybe calls that have been made, or on the marketing side, how many podcasts were done, or how many deals were underwritten. Those things, are we hitting those benchmarks? And then we'll move into what's called we'll talk about rocks. So rocks are actually 90-day goals. And we'll try to figure out, hey, where's each team member at on their rocks? And we're just moving into a phase now where we're going to encourage team members to have 3 personal and 3 professional rocks. And so we'll talk about those during the meeting as well. If anybody's stuck on the rocks or they're behind, we track those. And then we'll have what's called an IDS time, identify, discuss, and solve issues. So people bring up issues, preferably they put it, they've emailed it to me or whatever before the meeting or the day before, and then we'll prioritize those. We'll try to talk through issues that the team member is having as a team. As well. Oftentimes an issue that someone's having may involve numerous team members. And so that's helpful at that moment. And that team member leads that discussion around that issue that they're experiencing. And then we move to a time of to-do. So what came out of that meeting? What came out of the issue solving time? What needs to happen between now and the next L10? So over the next 7 days, if, hey, Joe, you need to do this. Hey, Amy, you need to do this. And I'll go back over those. I'll make notes of those as we're going. So I'll conclude the meeting. Hey, this is what we're going to try to accomplish over the next 7 days. Here you go. Right. Have a great day. See you at the huddle tomorrow. Right. And then we move forward.
Taking a step back, what's your best real estate investing advice ever?
Must have a great mentor, in numerous, most likely. Have a great mentor to bypass the failings, right? Have somebody that's been there and done it. I think that is just crucial in speeding up your process, but also just your confidence level. I think that was crucial for me and with you, Joe. Just having somebody that's been there and done it, whether it's a podcast, whether it's that first deal, whatever it may be, that just elevates your confidence from saying, okay, now I can, instead of doing the 15 unit, now I can do a 25 unit. No, we can do a $20 million project. I mean, it's a massive jump, right? I think it's because of mentors.
Been there, done that, and actively doing it and knows how to teach how to do it. I remember Tim Ferriss talks about that a lot, where he interviews high performers, and it's one thing if a high performer is just a stud, but it's another if they can communicate how they became that good at something and then teach others. So that's a different skill set. And I by no means am promoting my consulting program. It's not something I'm actively looking to grow anymore. So this is really about the importance of finding someone or a group that can help all of us get to another level. I personally am in a group, a mastermind, to help me professionally and personally do that. And Whitney's in at least one group I know of, mine, and there's many other ones. I remember Tony Robbins talks about where the expectations of our peer groups, and he used an example of actually it was a military example. Someone I think it was a Marine was saying, why do some of my fellow Marines, when they get out, they excel and others do not? And he said, one reason is because when you're in the Marines or when you're in the Army, boy, you're around people who are performing at an incredibly high level, and so it elevates the group. But then when you get out of that environment, you've got to either do it yourself or find others who are similar to that, and it helps you continue to stay at that level. And so surrounding yourself with a peer group who has high expectations is instrumental in being successful in any business, let alone real estate. We're doing a lightning round. You ready for the best ever lightning round?
Let's do it.
Best ever deal you've done.
Our second syndication, 216 units, Colorado Springs, value add, sold it in 18 months, 2x investor returns.
What made that deal perform that way?
Market. A lot of the, just market dynamics, no
What
doubt.
market?
Colorado Springs.
Colorado Springs. Okay.
Yeah, timing.
What deal if you lost the most amount of money on, and how much?
It would be those triplexes that I talked about, the first ones that we purchased. And I would say instead of a dollar amount, it would be the brain damage, the time lost from, my bride, right? Newly married, and all the stress that was related to those projects. That time lost with her, I think, was the most valuable thing that was lost on a deal so far.
I get that and totally understand. But how much money was lost on those deals? Just so we have a number.
On that project, probably 30 to 40,000 on the triplex.
Okay. Best ever way you like to give back to the community?
Through our foundation called the Omna Foundation, we help families with the financial burden of adoption. It can cost 40 to 60 grand, unfortunately, to bring a child home through adoption. A lot of families say, hey, Whitney, that's more than I'm making a year. How can we do that? And so we partner with them with large grants.
And how can the best ever listeners learn more about what you're doing?
lifebridgecapital.com.
Whitney, enjoyed our conversation. Thanks for talking about your journey, what's worked, what hasn't worked, current challenge, and how you're implementing the structure with the remote team, which is incredibly challenging, and some tactical things that you're doing to help with that. So thanks for being on the show. Hope you have the best ever day, and talk to you again soon.
My pleasure, Joe. Thank you.